that we have to work with in a very difficult time right now, to be able to work with people that really don't know where they're going to be looking at to be able to help with what's going on. So to begin with, for all of you who don't know, my name is Ray Yates, and I've been a member of GRAN for over 4 years. We are going to be asking you to use the chat function today for lots of ideas, hopefully yours, and also any questions. As always, we're going to start with the land acknowledgement, and we would ask you during that time, if you don't mind, put your location into the chat and 1 or 2 words that describe what you get out of GRAN. That information is not going to be used at this time during the webinar, but we will be looking at it after. Then I'll be introducing our recruitment team and our presenters. And following the presentation, there will be a question and answer period. So use the chat function for any questions that arise during the presentation. It will be monitored and answered at the end of the program. You can ask questions about grants specifically in the chat. I'll hopefully be able to help answer with that, but I've got some really good other ones behind me to help with that as well. And we will be looking at taking time to look at what ideas resonated with you. So at this time, I would like to do the land acknowledgement that GRAN developed because we are Canada-wide. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral territories of all the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who have been stewards of this land from time immemorial and who have chosen to share their knowledge and wisdom. As GRAN activists, we take this opportunity to commit ourselves to the struggle against the systems of oppression and colonialism that have dispossessed Indigenous peoples of their land and denied their rights to self-determination. This advocacy is essential to human rights work across the world. The idea of the recruitment team started at Hello Friends about a year ago, in fact, last May. One of the honorees, Professor Elizabeth Vibert, made an offhand comment about how there were many older women who would be eager and or happy to work with our group. So I took on a bit of a task and we worked it out for September. The RT is made of Liz Dill, Lynn Latulippe, and Joanne Stead. Also, we were ably helped in the beginning by Pat Dolan and Sue McKenna. We've accomplished a lot, including a focused recruitment retention plan, creating a new recruitment handout that is now available on our website. You must sign in as a GRAN member, then go to resources to the advocacy toolbox to find it. Okay. Then there was a wonderful article in the Globe and Mail, and then there is an upcoming article for senior magazines. I think it's June. We've welcomed the email for contacts through the website. Plus, we have regional leaders. I think that's it. Regional leader templates. And of course, by the way, we're doing this webinar. So I'd like to introduce Sya VanGeest from Guelph and Maxine Hermelin from Toronto, who will be presenting today. Theresa Randles sends her regrets, so thank you, Maxine, for joining us. Sya has been a member of G2G Group since the Stephen Lewis Foundation introduction of grandmothers to grandmothers. And Maxine has been with them since 2017. She has also chaired the DIRR, which is the title of this webinar, collective during its year of research. and was the chair from 2021 to 2022 and continues since its launch. Sya and Maxine have worked together for many years and are looking forward to today. So this webinar was G2G groups share many basic things with the GRAN Advocacy Network, including being a Canada-wide network, attracting older women and creating their success. The situation in both groups is how do we retain and recruit new members, as well as creating diverse and inclusive groups. So you're going to hear about goals that are the SLF, which are not the GRAN advocacy goals. However, we are looking at very similar situations and can extrapolate our goals from there. Your challenge today is to think of how the points made in this webinar relate to you and your group. Nothing is totally right for everyone. You guys, we know we're right across the country. We all have different situations. But I want you to focus on the needs of your specific local area. And if you have questions about GRAN or the webinar, please use the chat function. Therefore, Maxine, Sya, would you like to unmute yourself and take it away? Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you. Thank you. This is a wonderful opportunity for us as I bring up the slideshow.
Sya and I are very pleased to share our DIRR project with GRAN, growing and strengthening the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign through our diversity, inclusion, recruitment, and retention project.
Now
there will be 3 components in our presentation, as you can see on your screen. We're going to tell you a little bit of the history of the DIRR. We're going to talk about the summary of findings and recommendations from our research, and hopefully this will lead to meaningful applications for GRAN. So let's start with the beginnings. The DIRR began at a campaign call in May of 2021. And you'll see the timeline on your screen as well. And it was largely generated after the success of our cross-country concert, which we held during COVID. Through that campaign call, a committee of 25 members was formed to support the growth of the grandmothers movement. We set ambitious goals for ourselves. We identified important issues such as growth and diversity. We were aware of the importance of the relevance of HIV and AIDS, the use of technology. We used it to our advantage at that time. And it was important for us to ensure that we were aligned with the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign strategic plan. So we conducted research over 1 year, and we came together on a regular basis to share our progress. And then it was time to take the show on the road. So what we've done in that capacity is we've done several presentations. The first one was to the GRLs. We did a presentation on a campaign call. We have made presentations to a number of groups and gatherings, including the International Grandmothers Gathering that was in Winnipeg in October of 2024. Sometimes we're invited to do a presentation about the whole project. Sometimes people focus in on specific ones that relate to their group and that of specific concern. The recording of the presentation to the GRLs is actually on the SLF website. And we're currently at the phase of utilizing the materials and putting it into action. So we're continuing as a smaller group now, and we continue to respond to requests for presentations such as today. We incorporate feedback from presentation to direct us and enhance for future generations. And we're also adapting to new ways of sharing this information. On March the 6th, to celebrate International Women's Day, we were part of hosting an event at the SLF offices in Toronto. And we talked about the DIRR project, and we had a book talk as well. Some of you may have been there. And so we're looking at possibly morphing into other possible ways of bringing this to the attention widely, and drawing in other ways of marking this. I'm going to turn it over to Sya now.
Oh, hello. Oh, there. So we started with, as a group of 25, looking at what are some of the issues, and they were numerous, but you'll recognize among these 6 exactly the kind of things that you would have thought of. And one of them, of course, was that promoted the study in the first place, that the number of groups we declined. We were at one point well before COVID at 240, and we're now at 160. The same kinds of things that concern what we've been talking about is the diversity, aging membership. You'll be interested to know that one of them was the image of the grandmother name. So we looked at how we can explore that in terms of making that a little more applicable and to listening ears in other age groups and so forth. And you won't be surprised for that last one, because that very much affects your work, and that is that AIDS is no longer in the news. So out of those things, 6 working groups were designed. And as Maxine said, those 6 groups for the year, we went off each on our own, and we were all mandated and asked to do 2 things. First of all, work on your findings and be prepared to share those with the total group that Maxine chaired on a regular basis. And the second thing was, out of those findings, can you come up with some recommendations that we can act on those particular findings. Now, the last 2 groups that I've identified here, the useful tools and templates and the learning resources, they're online, and we're not going to share those. That for our purposes, they were very, very significant. But it's the first 4 that we want to share with you and focus on, and that we focused on a lot across the country in the ways that Maxine was talking about. So here is one of the group's reports, and Maxine, you're going to tell us about that one.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you about recruitment strategies for growing groups. We, with help of the SLF, we identified 5 groups, and we conducted interviews over Zoom. If I'm not mistaken, Lynn Latulip was involved in the larger group, and I think this is one of the groups that Lynn was directly involved with. We focused in that group on member onboarding and retention, recruiting a younger demographic, increasing diversity, and asking for suggestions for recruitment and current member retention. So in common, what we found was several of the 5 groups, several were operating for 10 years or more. 4 of the groups were actually started at the beginning in 2006 after the Toronto gathering. In terms of the demographics and diversity, the groups ranged in numbers from 30 members to 480 members. The age of the members range from about 50 to 80 plus, predominantly comprised of white people. 2 groups had some visible minorities. 1 group had known LGBTQ2S members. A couple of the groups charged nominal annual fees, and then we talked about the structure of the groups. They all had a structured organizational framework with boards and subcommittees, holding monthly meetings. But what was really important was an educational component was integrated into their meetings. So with a goal to keep members inspired, interested, and informed. Most groups actually didn't have recruitment strategies. What worked was word of mouth and personal contacts, or recruiting new members from the events that were held, or doing outreach through having educational events at other events, and doing presentations at schools about HIV and AIDS and the SLF, or doing media interviews. So a critical issue really is onboarding and retention. The goal obviously is to have new members feel welcome, engaged, and informed. So some of the welcome strategies include linking new members with others who have similar interests, placing new members on committees right away, welcoming them onto committees, featuring new members in newsletters, creating a buddy system. So yeah, with the recognizing that early and fun involvement is the key. In terms of diversity, one group, which was actually my group, Grandmothers Partnering with Africa, we formed a committee to deal with diversity and inclusion, and we embraced the causes of Black Lives Matter and Indigenous issues, and we tried to build bridges and form local alliances in a range of ways, but we had very limited success, and then COVID happened. Technology was a really, really important issue, because we know through technology we raise awareness, we can communicate through our websites and social media. Our group had techie people on board, so we were able to adapt and carry on over Zoom, having meetings and having events. So retention, we learned, was having members take on responsible roles, the importance of fun and socializing. Some groups would contact members, new members, on an annual basis to check in on them, on do they have concerns, what are their interests. And what's important that we learned was that a lot of groups had very valuable materials, such as orientation guides, new member kits, new member welcome letters, and a new member orientation program. All of this was available for sharing and very useful. Other suggestions for recruitment that didn't necessarily happen, but they were identified, was to attend retirement seminars, to hold focus groups with younger women to find out how to attract them. And one group collaborated with a local technology college to increase their social media presence. So that's, in summary, the growing groups results.
Now, what was interesting is from those growing groups, which, by the way, was the one group that did primary research, so they actually went to those groups. A lot of the other groups, being this retention one, we did do interviews and stuff, but a lot of them was also involved literature and looking with other groups and so forth. What you'll find in the next groups, and what we found that often when we then got together, is that there was this overlap, that there were similar findings, and there were also similar recommendations, which was kind of comforting in a way, because we were always looking for some commonalities. So the group retention, what that group looked at, what are the challenges there? Well, if we asked and talked to each other, you'd know very quickly that it was the aging was the one big factor. Definitely COVID did a number on us. It certainly did a number on the Go-Go grandmothers here in Guelph, a huge number. The challenge was that some people were keenly interested in the group activities, like, again, I'm going to reference the Go-Go grandmothers, because when we had things like the hats off and fashion shows and jewelry shows and things that everybody could get involved in, then that was one way. So these were some of the challenges of that retention. And then in terms of recommendations, what came out of there was looking a little more closely as what are the needs of the audience that we're trying to reach. So in other words, reverse it a little bit. Instead of telling people what we do, go out and do some really serious thing, looking at what do other people do? What are the seniors looking for? And in the MAC study, which we'll talk about later, you'll find some really interesting correlation of that. Like, what is it that other groups that they might need? The other thing is to do in service for each other, especially again during COVID. Make sure that people are comfortable with some of the electronics. Now, our particular group was the same in terms of having somebody, as Maxine's did, and we never did miss a monthly meeting because we just went over on Zoom. But then for some people, that wasn't that comfort level either. So in other words, the support services that we were providing to retain people in the groups came to be a little different. And there were recommendations that you saw from Maxine that the groups were doing, which were things like having an education component, having support material, and that sort of thing. Now, from the campaign point of view, the GRLs for us were hugely significant. And I happen to be in a geographic group where we have Theresa Randles, and she's absolutely a walking miracle. She's just a wonderful GRL, pulling us together and so forth. The SLF and the Grandmother Campaign are very supportive as well. And they were most concerned. One of the most precious things that they do is still their monthly meetings. And I know people like Lynn, I see you on there. And it's just a wonderful kind of tool for communication. I love what you're doing, by the way, is gathering thoughts from each of you. What does GRAN mean to you? Because then we're finding out what the component people that are there think, and what are their needs and what are their interests. And for a huge part with those gatherings, the gatherings can't be overemphasized. That dynamic interplay of not only having great speakers and workshops and so forth. So encouraging people to attend the gatherings. And before we started the meeting, we were talking about one that we hosted here. There was just something just so exciting about that sense of community and all of us in this together, and these strong women all meeting together. So the findings and recommendations from the group retention. And then another group is this diversity and inclusion. Maxine.
Great, thank you. So you can appreciate that there'll be challenges and roadblocks to the issue of diversity and inclusion. It might be difficult to establish relationships with diverse organizations. Reaching out to diverse organizations could potentially be fraught with risks to offend. We may not be as politically astute or be in tune as they are to repression in our society, in our actions and words and in our inherent privilege. We may encounter differing worldviews, which we'll need to learn from and accept. Their focus might be on assisting their local and overseas communities and families. There could be resistance to partner with a white-led organization. There may be differences in the way organizations work. And we may impose our culture on other cultures. So where do you go from that? Here are the recommendations. We begin by learning. It's important to have educations at our group meetings. Read, take courses, enlighten ourselves. Look into existing diversity-based organizations. Ensure that the member who's connecting with other groups has a solid understanding of how SLF operates. We must be willing to make changes. Take a look at our materials, our print materials that we work with. Ensure that the language is inclusive, ensure that it reflects the SLF philosophy, have the SLF vet any kind of formal print material. Ensure that we're focusing on African grandmothers and community-based organizations in Sub-Saharan Africa and place ourselves as partners to them. So how do we begin building these relationships? When we prepare our communications, be they verbal or written, approach individuals of diverse backgrounds for suggestions on the language. Ask questions with the intention of learning and taking direction from what we learn. Our task is to work towards empathy, to listen to the story or the message. We want to create a space together and not divide ourselves into camps. Speak on a one-to-one basis in order to develop relationships. So, here's an example of how you could do that. Like use unfinished sentences as a technique. For example, what we need to do is, and leave it open-ended, or what you suggest would be, and they fill in. Invite speakers from diverse groups or organizations who are dynamic and compassionate. Suggest a topic like, how do you address the challenges to equity and justice in your work? And make sure that whoever is introducing or that representative or speaker, there might be a good idea to have a consultation in advance about language and ceremony to make sure that our event is respectful and appropriate. And another question that arose was how to nurture mutuality. So we want to look for organizations which function in a way that aligns with the foundation's vision. We want to support their events, attend their events, donate items to their events, have information tables at their events. The idea is to collaborate and work in partnership. Support and use local businesses owned by diverse groups in the community for such things as catering, music, and event rentals. We always use social enterprise caterers for any social events that our group has. And it's important to be flexible to other ways of doing things. Don't be steadfast, and this is the only way. Go into uncharted territory and shake things up a bit. That is what we learned.
So the alternate ways of involvement was interesting too. So if we have these particular issues, are there other ways that people can join the group? So I'm going to use my own daughter as a perfect way. There's no way she's going to come to meetings. I did that all my life at work, Mom. I'm not. But for instance, we had a Scrabble event a couple of weeks ago, and she was there. I was in charge of the auction. She loves Excel. She created it all. She created the bidding sheets and stuff like that. So are we open to, and I think we do all do that, get our own children, but other people as well. Got a team now, and they're going to help with Rotary Rib Fest, and they'll earn $300 for the campaign. They'd love to do that, like help in some ways, but really be open and exploring it, because the issues that we found and that this group identified was that the way we were doing things was not necessarily what spoke to them. So again, that being open, and what Maxine mentioned is open to change. I mean, after all, we've been in place since 2006, and a lot has happened in the world. So to do that, then again, the recommendations out of this particular group was, when people see us, I mentioned the grandmother name, for instance, but do we emphasize, for instance, in terms of the foundation, that important thing of how it's a partnership. We're not helping the grandmothers. The grandmothers in Africa and the grandmother campaign, they're brilliant people. They know what they need. They got the organization and stuff, and we're just giving them the wherewithal to do that. In the messaging, as a follow-up out of this, one of the ways that we put it together was we actually, and that was with Theresa organizing it, she called several of our groups together, and we put up what we had that we were now using in terms of putting out messages like the social media, posters, and that kind of stuff. So as an example, for instance, there was one group that had just printed hundreds of bookmarks. The top photograph was a charming photograph. It showed a white woman and a black woman, and the white woman was in the front, and she was holding the baby. So the mother was in the background, and we could immediately see that, oh my goodness, that's not the kind of correct image. So it's then how we respond and how we then, with these recommendations that were so carefully thought of, is that how they, what that looks like. Social media, you know, having the wherewithal to be able to do all that, and certainly you've got in your group people that are doing that, and your website again. I love just exploring it, and I'm hoping that maybe I can be allowed in that membership, because I'd love to see your advocacy toolbox. But that whole idea of sharing and tapping each other, and then supporting each other, and then allowing that, being open and flexible. Because again, our numbers here in Go Grandmothers have dropped really, really seriously, but we have been open to getting people involved at different levels, not necessarily in the way that we would hope as ongoing. We have to reach out to them, but that's okay. That's become okay. So that involvement, the findings that they found, and then the recommendations that came out of those findings. Now,
Okay, you probably know Theresa Randles. She's involved with the Hamilton's Grandmothers of Steel. Well, Theresa was part of our working group, and she has a close connection to the faculty in the Women's Studies program at McMaster. And she approached them about developing a study on how might the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign groups recruit and sustain the next generation of volunteers. As a result, a funded and credited project was created for advanced students called the McMaster University Community Engagement Research Shop. And the study was volunteer recruitment and sustainability, personal motivations, and organizational influence. The purpose was to explore literature related to volunteerism, including theories and factors around what motivates the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign target demographic to volunteer. The focus was on middle-aged or older women, women from different ethnic, racial, and cultural backgrounds, and women who volunteer for international or HIV and AIDS organizations. These findings were used to recommend ways that the organization could recruit their next generation of volunteers. Sya will now walk you through the study's highlights.
What is interesting, the full report, it's a fascinating report to read, their findings, and specifically about some of the groups, especially the New Canadian groups and different cultural groups and so forth. But out of their study, they came up with recommendations. What was comforting to us, it kind of mirrored and reflected a lot of what we had discovered during our year of study, looking at the findings and then the recommendation. So they clustered their recommendations into 3 areas. And that is, and it's been mentioned earlier again, but appeal to the volunteers' motivations. What is their motivation to becoming part of a group? Well, for them, the strong altruism, I think that's something that we share. I think we're all in there because we love humanity, we care, we want to make a difference. And that would be all the groups that they research, whatever group that was a big part of the motivation. But it's that sense of community, and that was mentioned in the growing groups, right? Is having fun together, getting together in person and so forth. So what can we do then in terms of how we market or promote our group that will allow the person that we're contacting to see in us that sense of community and feel like they can be part of it. What they did find, which was quite interesting actually, the degree to which, although I mentioned altruism, there was also that strong sense from these groups that they explored of the personal skill development that they were looking for. So I'm a member of Rotary and just met last week we've got a connection where we're supporting Ukrainian refugees. So we met with them, and it came out very strongly why they want to meet with us is to develop their skills, like English language. They came with lots of computer skills. Thank you very much. But, you know, learning about Canadian society and that kind of stuff. So can we set up things where the people that we appeal to would get that sense and that our messaging appeals to that particular aspect? Establish those relationships with other group. Maxine's mentioned about educating ourselves and when it came to inclusion and stuff. So do we attend their groups? Do we support their activities as mentioned? An interesting experience for me, for instance, was I belong to a social justice group at my particular church, Dublin Street United, and we do series of speakers. So we had a speaker series titled Walking a Mile in Your Moccasins. So I was organized, so you know how you do, you stand up, right? It's a circle, of course. So we were in a circle, and then I stand up and talk about the house rules, you know, where the washrooms are and where the fire exits are, and we've got books on the bookshelf, and during our break, and there's refreshments there. And then during the discussion, what Jan, bless her heart, said, and in an Indigenous circle, no one ever stands up because we're always equal. So that seed was planted. I thought, oh, okay. So the Go-Go Grandmothers meetings now happen in a circle, and we don't stand up. So it's interesting, that continual learning. So think about it. If they came to one of our meetings and we got this hierarchy, like, you know, like the lectern with the sage on the stage up on the top and that kind of stuff, that may not work that well. And yeah, those building relationships and forth. That the third thing they looked at is what is our organizational strategy that I've mentioned just a little bit of that anecdote with Jan, and the influence of leadership. So again, where do we embrace and include a newcomer so that they feel like they know what's happening? But I know that you share in this concern. You never know when someone comes, there's the delicate balance, isn't it? You don't want to overwhelm someone and say, hello, this is the committee you're on. On the other hand, we don't want them sitting in the background either. So there is that delicate balance. I know with the Go-Go Grandmothers, and I'm sure some of you might do that with newcomers as well, and we certainly do that in the community I live, is we have the red dot, you know, a red dot on their name tag, so that you know, okay, there's a newcomer, and you immediately engage them more in a conversation. So as I say, the MAC study, their findings were interesting. We certainly learned some new things, but in terms of the key recommendations, they very much echoed the kinds of things that we had discovered in our particular research as well.
So, okay, after sharing DIR's research and recommendations through presentations such as this, we want to emphasize that we are interested in keeping this project relevant and in ensuring that it's living and dynamic for current and future development. There are the summary of the topics that we think are relevant for both the G2G and for GRAN are on the screen now. Our Q&A discussion, which will follow shortly, could address these or other issues. For example, do they relate to GRAN? Do you want to put the next slide on, Sya? Yeah. So do these questions relate to GRAN? Which ones are most relevant? And what does all of this look like in action? Sya is now going to show you some worksheets that we've developed.
And I was saying, by the way, that these worksheets, they're worksheets that we'd share. We put them into the PowerPoint, but these have been applied and have been used successfully by different groups. So if in your group, your topic you're looking at is that diversity, well, we've got a worry here. I mean, it's how do we encourage that? And then out of those groups came a summary of those recommendations. And then in each of the groups, what we encourage is looking at these particular questions. You'll kind of notice a uniformity in terms of how we structure this. For instance, we always did findings, recommendations. Now in this, we're doing the same thing, because then we can we can create a database and we can incorporate new findings and that kind of stuff. So for your particular focus, maybe member recruitment. Why are we struggling to get new members? Are we explaining? And then either in small groups, now I know one group, we've got these 5 topics, and what they've done is each month, their particular groups looks at one of these. And then they do it in small group and then focus on these because they're finding that each one has become a challenge. If your topic is member retention, so you'll notice a pattern here. That's always the topic, the stated concerns, and then the recommendation. Now, personally, I would love the 4 Gs to do this particular one, leadership, because a friend and I kind of kept the Go-Go Grandmothers alive since the 2nd year of COVID. And we're having this challenge, you know, and getting new members to take on these leadership role. And part of the problem is that everybody that we now have in the group has either been there and done that, or they prefer not to because that's not their cup of tea, right? So then taking a look at different kinds of expectations and different models of leadership, you know, sharing the leadership more, having it grounds up instead of the top down, that kind of stuff. And then the branding and messaging. That was one of the ones that I mentioned that we put into action. And that's the whole notion of this. So we've shared this research. It's been a year. We did the math. We've seen the findings and the recommendation. All right. So now the question is, so what? Do we use this document to hold up a 60mm screen? That was kind of the joke as a teaching librarian when I was teaching, you know, that it just sits, in other words, or can we go on and do something in addition to that? So what we're hoping then is that you will then feel like there's an ability for you to pick up one of these and do them in whatever manner that you would like. And then we are really, truly interested in your feedback. And I think, Maxine, you were going to...
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone that there's a lot of resources available on the SLF website related to this project under tools and resources. And as Sya said, the content is ever evolving. We continue to incorporate feedback that we get on an ongoing basis. And so, reiterating what Sya said, we invite and we look forward to your feedback and how you've helped contribute to putting wheels on this project. We're grateful for hearing back from all of you, and it's been a privilege to be able to share this information with you. I know I have great admiration for the work that GRAN does. We're in a similar set of values and goals, and we can work and support one another in a number of ways.
That's great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I see Lynn busy writing away. Just to let everybody know, that McMaster report is on our website. So if you want to go to it, definitely it's there and available for you. Thank you so much for doing that. Whoa, Lynn, have you got anything?
Our members were very nice about answering the first question about their location, what they get out of GRAN, but so far we don't have any questions. So now that the formal presentation by Maxine and Sya is finished, I encourage you to put your questions in the chat. And as we said, you can have questions about the presentation and also about the implications for GRAN, and Ray and Maxine and Sya are available to respond to your questions. I know it was a fair amount of information, but you have seen the different aspects that were discussed. So please feel free to forward any questions. I see one here. Yes, one question was in terms of I'm just trying to paraphrase this. Given that there are a lot of similarities between GRAN and G2G groups, In terms of, but there are differences in terms of the work that we do. And would any of the presenters or Ray like to comment on the fact that, if there's differences around these issues of recruitment, retention, and diversity as they pertain to the different goals of SLF, G2G groups, and GRAN?
Well, I think straight out, one of the things we know as part of the GRAN advocacy network is patience is definitely our virtue. A lot of the G2G groups are able to get an immediate gratification when they've done something like your jewelry sales or your Scrabble night and things like that. Advocacy is definitely a long-term thing that we work with together, and that, I think, is one of our differences. Maxine or Sya?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ray, but that's the differences of what we see here on our end. And it's always a challenge, and it's a challenge for SLF period, is to make sure that we keep informed what that looks like on the ground. So I will have, for instance, we had a meeting where we invited kind of old timers and stuff in part of this Scrabble thing, and they're asking things like, well, why are we still doing this? Surely these grandkids, these orphans have grown up, right? So the challenge is to keep people informed. And that's where I love the fact that you've got a YouTube channel, and so does Stephen Lewis Foundation. They're short, some of them very pithy, information about what is happening in the ground. So for instance, the fact that in South Africa, a support group there of the Grandmothers Partnership, they graduated 40 women in the trades, women working on tractors and building trades and that kind of stuff. So I see, and I think that's for you as well, that's part of the frustration of the grandmother movement, is to keep people informed. Like, what does this money that we're raising? It's wonderful that we did. Now, what does this look like in action? And definitely one of the challenges that we continue. And that's where the monthly meetings that we have are so important. And we have the staff, they would describe things, what's happening on the ground and that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, the communication bit.
I would just add that we're always mindful of keeping the relevancy of HIV and AIDS paramount, and reminding people that it's ever present. And more recently, the Stephen Lewis's appeal because of US aid, a cutback. Like it's just a critical and dire situation. So in some sense, that is the kind of advocacy that we can do through the campaign. And just the importance of educating, always learning, and staying abreast of current issues.
I've got a hand up. Sandra, you didn't want to put your question in the chat? Then unmute yourself, please.
It wasn't a question so much as a comment. I went to an international meeting as a GRAN with a name tag on that said GRAN, and I was the only old person there. But I also I got a lot of attention, including someone who came up and said, I'm glad the GRAN's here. This was the conference held across the world. They were all coming to Ottawa to discuss how to promote better health through the Global Fund. And I left with a whole feeling of hope, because these people were all young people being paid to sit down and worry about how they increase the Global Fund. And simply showing up the first day, I felt I left the place in good hands with lots of hope. But wearing the name tag is all I did to have a number of people come up and want to know what is GRAN and why.
And that's
okay,
important.
Thank you.
We've had workshops, for instance, looking at things like an elevator speech, because what you bring up, Sandra, is can you very quickly, from the first floor to the 15th, tell people succinctly what you're about. And that takes a little bit of practice, and to do it with just not only knowledge, but also with engagement, like people can see like this is your heart is in it. So having that kind of contact, oh my gosh, that's invaluable.
Thank you, Sandra.
And Ray, I have 3 questions in the
Sure.
In the chat, and they're all different, so I'll just do them one at a time.
Please.
One is asked that the presenters if they could repeat the sourcing of this material.
Repeat the sourcing.
Yes.
Yeah, where'd you get it from?
Oh,
Sandra, hand down, please.
well, we got it from the groups putting things together. Each group made a report. Again, the sourcing of it, like the MAC study, again, that full report is online. And Lynn, I assume that you have access through Ubuntu to the membership ones. We had a discussion about sharing that, but that was the interesting part, actually. The sourcing was, as I say, some from primary research, like the actual study, and some from literature research. A lot of them was anecdotal, as a matter of fact. Yeah, I don't know whether that answers the person's question or not.
Yeah, and I think we are, as Ray has indicated, the more information about the McMaster study is available to GRANs, and we will also be posting the background information submitted by, as you said, the group that I worked on and the other groups.
But also, this material is on the SLF website. It's in the members section. So the separate components of the various the 6 different groups that met, all of their resources and reports are there as well under tools and resources.
Right, and we are also working on getting that over to our website as well, because sharing of information is really important, and to know where it came from and how it came in. Okay.
Another question, the person says, great presentation, and she's asking if there's been any examples of concrete actions that G2G groups have done as a result of this study that would have led to increased recruitment. And I can repeat that if you want.
Yeah, there have been, and if I may start by mentioning one thing, and that is what's happened more and more is that groups are doing activities together, and Maxine could talk about one of those specifically. And Lynn, you were there when we saw the African Voices from the Vancouver group. And those have resulted in larger numbers in some of the groups. Now, not particularly in ours, but that's an interesting question. So you can see that putting some of this together in action has had actual concrete results. What we're getting is more and more like using Eventbrite and having major events online that are being shared. And again, that we can see that an increase in money, but also as an increase in having more people involved. And again, in the Guelph group, if I may mention that, what we have had is more individual people doing projects. So for instance, Mary Rife with her bicycles, she on her own donated over $25,000 last year. Imagine. He just had a market. And again, this is a member with huge skills. He's an artist, and what she did was she sold over $840 at the recent gathering at a market. So people are doing things individually. So there has been growth when you see it in action, but people have changed to doing stuff together, doing stuff online. Our group actually partnered with Keeping Kids Fed at Home, which is an active group here in Guelph, and we did the Scrabble together. We shared 50-50 with the ticket sale and that kind of stuff. So it's not, I don't think, unless Maxine thinks there is, I don't think there's one specific way. It's diverse meeting. I think it's something that you said, Ray, we're also different across the country, different interests, different kind of focus, that kind of stuff.
It makes me think of something that we could do as a follow-up to our presentations by asking specifically in feedback, you know, how have you applied these actions and how has it impacted in terms of membership? But I would just like reinforce what Sya said around collaborations here in the GTA. We have our group was gifted a treasure trove of all kinds of art baskets and paintings and things like that. And we've been sharing them across the GTA groups, and we've held a number of art shows. And it's like working together with other groups is a really important way an effective way of building the campaign. And also just recruiting. We've recruited members from the venues where we hosted one of the art shows. And someone joined our group and has become a very active member, and her family was involved, has a background in the Underground Railroad. She gave an educational talk to one of our meetings recently. So you never know where this energy is going to come from. We have to keep reaching out, raising awareness, being present, such as Sandra, who said she was just wearing a button at a conference. Let's have a presence at those conferences.
I would like to add one thing, by the way, that was very successful and is still going on, and that is this absolutely gorgeous quilt. My God, among us seniors, we've got people that are so gifted artists in quilting, right? And this quilt is just stunning. And it was made across the country. It was documented. And what's most exciting, the border with all the pieces, they were made by quilters and artists in Africa. So this quilt's been traveling across the country, and it will land up in the Museum for Humanity in Winnipeg, and we'll have a special place there. So it's those kind of tools. I think what's happening is what you're seeing more is us taking advantage of the bigger world, the bigger that involves technology, and sharing that, and then using that and focusing on that. And that has resulted in some growth as well. Actually, our group, we got 3 new members, one from Aurelia, and then from a couple of other groups that have happened to have moved into Guelph. The interesting thing is 2 of them are very, very engaged with us, but 2 of them came quite elderly. They're very interested in being part of it, but they're past the stage of being able to lift a big pot or a big kettle and actually doing it. But they're there all the time, and they're lovely, lovely, lovely people.
Thank you. Lynn?
I think this is the last question I have at this time on the chat. In doing your research, did you notice any geographical differences in the issues of recruitment and retention?
Oh, what a good question that is. In geographic areas for recruitment and retention.
I would just say something about smaller communities. Like there's advantages and disadvantages. Sometimes smaller communities can have a wider outreach in terms of their media, but face other limitations just because of the population and the breadth and, that they can reach out to. That's what comes to mind for me.
And actually, what does come to mind, and again, specifically here, is the demise of news outlets and stuff, and that's had direct impact. Whereas in smaller communities, you might have that more personal kinds of contact. And I'm thinking of especially small communities that came up in Alberta. We got a couple of very strong members there, and she was part of the planning of it. And for instance, again, here in Guelph, and you must have found the same thing, you know, Snapped, I swear, the Go-Go Grandmothers, we were in Snapped every single month, you know, this documentation,
Right.
graphic documentation. And we had the Merc, and we were constantly in there. And that's now online, and Snapped is no longer there. So that was another factor, by the way, that we didn't really focus on, but that a lot of the groups found in terms of recruitment a really, really serious problem because it didn't put us out into the community.
I'm thinking coffee time. Lynn?
Here's a question. How could we use technology to recruit women who are living in those small rural areas?
Who are living in the small world areas?
Rural.
Oh, rural areas. Well,
I think we need to, if you don't mind, Sya, I think one of the things we're going to have to look at is what media is in the smaller rural areas. What gets messages out there. That's where we're going to have to depend on our people to let us know what's available. And then we'll see if the recruitment team can work on getting information in there. You work at it a bit and a bit and a bit, and hopefully find out. But a small rural area, unless you're traveling there on your vacation or going past it to visit, it's going to be up to you to find out and ask questions. That's about all I can see for it. Maxine, Sya?
I would just say, like, similar to what you're doing at GRAN, is you've got a YouTube channel. So you've got your resources there and available through technology. So it's how, like, raising awareness to have people take advantage of that and learn from that. So that's a challenge, but it's also a hopeful possibility for us to get the word out.
I kind of hesitated, Ray, because I'm thinking a lot of the rural communities I know, especially up in the Arctic, for instance, they were so much more versatile and knowledgeable about using technology than we were. I'm thinking of an exchange that I had in the 70s, and the Inuit kids that came down, we were North Baffin Island and Pawn Inlet. They knew more about the Blue Jays than my kids did. And they're, that's why you see the people that come, like refugees and stuff. I mean, the cell phone is like their knowledge of it, but it's, as Maxine said, how to get that out there. And that's a challenge. It was a challenge. Like, you go through the local school. Is there a policy?
That's an idea.
And that's a challenge for sure. Who to contact to get that out there.
We'll ponder on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Think we're okay? Liz, did you have something, or you're okay?
I was just going to ask, in terms of the geographical differences, it is east-west of Canada too. I just wondered if you had noticed any differences in that recruitment retention issue, that in terms of the geography of Canada, not specifically small and large towns.
Yeah. What is interesting with that, Liz, was that when we were doing the concert, we found it a real challenge to engage groups in Quebec. Okay. And that was a challenge in terms of, I mean, the foundation is not in French English. And we had really a devil of a time to get performers or stuff into contact specifically in Quebec. And so much like the East Coast, again, for that concert and engaging them, we're very, very much engaged. But that's because there were and you're going to find the same thing in GRAN, right? It's that strong personality that's going to be a leader that pulls things together. But yeah, the smaller groups, there were certainly special challenges in terms of getting that word out there. I'm sounding a little vague. I'm trying to think specifically. There was a great group in up in Aurelia, for instance, not that that's such a small town. What do you think, Maxine? Because some of those small towns, they had really big, large ones, right?
One small sample, I have a friend who's in a small group in around the Prince Edward County. And they don't necessarily meet very often, and they have like very, very small events that are mostly like sales and things on bake sales or art sales, things of that nature. But no, I don't know that we encountered obvious differences in, from east to west that I'm aware of.
And as you're going into your recruitment thing, it'd be fascinating for you to share your findings and your experiences in that area. And that's where we can learn from each other for sure.
We'll see what we can do on that one. Lynn.
Yeah, I just got a comment that says, this has been a great presentation and it's very relevant to GRAN, was the comment, and a thank you.
And thank you very much. So, Sya and Maxine, thank you for a wonderful presentation. If you wish to sign off now, you are welcome to. However, you're also more than welcome to stay for the little bit that's left of the webinar. Participants, what did you hear today that resonated with you? Please put it in the chat function. We're going to collate all those answers and distribute them to all the participants anonymously, of course. We know who you are. We have your emails. We are also going to be sending those worksheets that Sya and Maxine talked about. They are going to give them to Lynn and I, and we will make sure that they are part of the package that goes out to you. But let us know what resonated with you. I just was writing notes. Educational component, I think, is a big one that as grants we can really look into and work on. We do so good on educating ourselves on our projects. Like the small SIPs are unbelievable. And just everything that works with that, we know about our actions. But to expand our recruitment and to diversify, we have to educate ourselves about the people that we're working with and around and who's around us. So that was a biggie for me. And I like the idea of the buddy system. When we get a new member, we haven't done it, but you know, I really think it's a good idea. Hang on, you got yourself a buddy. So those were two things that really came across out of pages of notes. We won't talk about all my notes. I can't read half of them right at the moment. So please use the chat session and just put them in for us. Okay. Right.
I guess
Thank you.
everyone is thinking because we had
Thinking.
one person commenting. So just to
You
continue.
want me to put mine in?
Well, no, but just to encourage people to keep on. One or two things that resonated with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with you, Diane. And I also like the idea of the skills. Passing on, people being able to use the technology well is really, I think, excellent. And it's something we can do in our groups, or we can bring on speakers on it too. But raising everybody's skills, I mean, come on. Believe it or not, I am going to go learn how to do a podcast tonight. So we will see how that goes at our library. So we're all learning new skills, whatever way we can.
It's Janet here. I've just unmuted as your Zoom host. Did you want to keep the call going for another minute or so?
Just for another minute, if we can. Thank you. Yeah, well, those can go down. I don't think we're getting much more now into the chat. But what we do get, we will pass on for sure. Let everybody. Who's in England? Stella. Thank you for joining us. Are you enjoying yourself?
I'm here on family business. I have a sick relative, so
I'm
not
sorry.
really, it's a holiday, but
Oh, that's too bad.
yeah.
But I don't know. Best fish and chips I ever had was over there. So depends on what part you're in. All right. And this is going out to everybody who's a grant, because we understand the getting people to come in for leadership. Recruitment and retention are ongoing. Oh, Liz, yes. What would you like?
I just wanted to say to people that one of the things, if you haven't put it in the chat, but still could let us know if there are specific things that you would hope to have from GRAN that would support yourselves in your work or in your groups too. So that's something,
Okay.
beyond this.
Mm-hmm. We want to do recruitment and retention as an ongoing process, and it's something that needs our focused attention. However, we will need your help if we're to continue this job into the future. That means more GRANs need to become a part of the recruitment team to re-energize it and bring their ideas to the foreground. Yes, I'm looking for volunteers. For those participants without a regional leader or a group, please take advantage of our newly created virtual group and let them become an idea factory as well. Lynn Latulipe's email address is in the chat function. It's also in the update. And so we would ask you to get in touch with her and we will get this virtual group going. Cross your fingers. Thank you so much for all your participation. I thoroughly appreciated it. And that's it from us. You and Stella, I can't believe you came from England.
Thank you, Ray.
You're welcome, everybody.
And then
You can-
everybody,
You can
and
leave the
especially the
meeting.
speakers, Maxine, Sya.
It was lovely to see all of you and all who
Yes.
came, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you,
carry
everyone.
on.
Sya, Maxine, hopefully talk again.